What are you saying, geezers? It's Spessy. Today we're looking at Marvel Snap Zone's meta report. Every month I do this. Every month I'm quite critical, but let's see how I feel about it this month. My own meta report is coming in the next couple of days, so be looking out for that. So make sure you're subscribed. Sarah Control, the top deck in the meta. Well, I was expecting to see Shuri at the top. Of course, Shuri has caught a lot of nerfs, but I do agree Sarah Control is a pretty great deck. The main issue with this list for me right now is that Leech and Sandman and Wave, these decks and cards have very high play rates at the moment, and that does make a bit of a problem for Sarah. Dropping that Sarah on turn 5 into a Leech or a Wave is pretty much surefire loss. So I personally wouldn't put it at the top of tier 1. I would put it at the top of tier 2 or maybe the bottom of tier 1, but probably tier 2 for me, right near the top. I do love that they've gone for Bast as the best way to play this one though. I'm really excited to share my Bast Sarah Control list. Slightly different, I have no Luke Cage and Hazmat, but Bast and Hitmonkey just offer some really nice combos with this one with Mysterio, Bishop and Angela. They've gone for Absorbing Man as well, as you can either copy Hitmonkey with that, you can copy the Shang-Chi or Enchantress with the Zabu. Nice cost reduction with this one. It's definitely a solid deck. I can see why they've put it near the top. They've also offered some other versions of this, which I think is great. I definitely agree Bast is the way to go. This is a more traditional kind of take. They've still included the Hitmonkey, even without the Bast. No Maximus in this one. That's obviously the big benefit of not playing Bast. You can play Lizard, you can play Maximus. But in a deck like this, the amount of points that the Bast plays for is through the roof. Your Hitmonkey's getting 3, your Angela's getting 3, your Mysterio's getting 5, and it's just a 1 energy card. Lots of people in my comments yesterday a little bit unhappy that I said that I think Bast should get nerfed, but when you do the maths on the card, it does play for more points than any other 1-drop. I wouldn't be surprised to see it nerfed in the next coming months. Destroy Sarah Control also gets a mention. I haven't seen this deck. I wouldn't recommend it particularly either. It's like a dated version of the Sarah Control lists. Shuri Zero then is also making its way into tier 1 with a slightly surprising list with the Sauron being in there. But honestly, I quite like the concept. You're still playing Cosmo and Armor. If you do hit Cosmo, you still play the Cosmo on 3, but if you miss it, then you just go for the Sauron instead, which allows you to play Ebony Maw a little bit later. And of course, your Red Skull then is going to be cheap. They've still gone for Vision over Captain Marvel, which I think is a mistake. I think Captain Marvel is just superior because you don't get Shang-Chi'd at all. You just play the Captain Marvel into the Armor or Cosmo lane, and then she's going to move herself, which means you don't have to move Captain Marvel potentially into a Shang-Chi. But Shuri, still a great deck. It has definitely become worse with all the nerfs. She-Hulk lost a point. Red Skull's lost 3 points at this moment now, so I still think it's the best deck in the game, though, by quite a distance, to be honest with you. All right, moving on to tier 2, we have a Patriot deck, and Patriot has been performing really quite well looking at the stats. It doesn't have the highest play rate though, but I do think Patriot's pretty interesting as a concept at the moment. This list has been doing the rounds quite a lot. I like the idea of it overall, like the Onslaught I'm a big fan of. The Ultron makes a lot of sense when there's so many Sandman decks doing the rounds as well, as that's just going to give you a nice out against those decks for sure. But the Thing, for example, just seems a little bit out of place. Overall though, a very interesting deck. I do agree with it being in tier 2. Although I'm not sure it should be quite so high up. However, I have seen that it has got a very impressive win rate. I just don't think it gets played that much and maybe therefore gets a little bit of surprise value, but no issues with Patriot being up there. We've also got another version of Patriot. This is the one with Valkyrie and Iron Man and Bast. I definitely prefer the concept of this kind of deck more myself. All right, moving on, we've got Thanos ongoing, finishing above death. Thanos, which I definitely agree with. This is not a list I've personally played, but quite a nice concept with the armor and the Professor X protecting you from the Killmongers. The Valkyrie works really well, very similar to Ordinary Harry's list that he won the New York City tournament with a couple of months back now. That was really the deck which propelled Thanos onto the radar as being one of the best decks in the game, and I like the look of this list overall. The Goose may be a little bit weird, but this looks like a really solid deck, and I agree with it being better than Death. The Death Thanos deck is definitely going to be better in the mirror though. They've got a few other versions of this deck as well with some different ideas. I can't comment too much. I do like the idea of the Professor X, the Khazar, the Blue Marvel and the armor to protect all of your 1-drops. I think that's going to be pretty damn nice. I like the idea a lot. Up next we have Zabu Devil Darkhawk. This is a deck I see quite a bit of, and I do think it's a pretty underrated deck. I have been struggling against this one quite a lot with my Silver Surfer deck until I added Rogue into it for this exact matchup. I think it's a great deck. The build looks pretty secure to me, nothing jumping out. Maybe just the lack of Chavez would be my one question mark, because you're often going to be moon girling and just trying to play 2 dinos or something like that. You're often going to have close to a full hand, so Chavez does make a lot of sense. But it looks like a solid list, and yeah, I agree with it being a tier 2 deck. All right. There's a Ronin Darkhawk deck here. This is very similar to the deck that Dara played in the recent Infinity Gauntlet tournament to get to Infinite rank. I don't think this is his exact list. It's slightly different. I don't have too much to say on this one because I don't own Master Mold, but I do think it's a pretty good deck. Another Darkhawk deck here with like some good cards, a Wave, a She-Hulk, and a Doom. I actually tried something very similar with a Bast. I thought it was okay, but not spectacular. I've been trying quite a lot of Wave and She-Hulk decks with Doom as well. The idea being you play Wave on 5 and then She-Hulk and Doom on 6, or maybe She-Hulk and Arrow on 6. And on paper they sound so good, but they haven't worked out quite as well as I've been hoping. But still a nice list to include nonetheless. I think that the better way though to go would be with a Bast buffing up. No, that's not true. Bast She-Hulk sounds pretty bad, so ignore what I just said. Thanos Death, going down slightly. I think this deck got massively overrated. Quite a few people were like really talking this deck up as the best Thanos deck, which just never makes sense to me. How does it make sense to Killmonger all of your stones just to play a death? Well, it certainly does sometimes, but the issue is that you have a 17 card deck where you need to draw the Killmonger, you need to draw the Wave, and you need to draw the death, which is of course not going to happen all that often. It's certainly going to be favored in the Thanos mirrors unless they have that armor and Professor X. That's a nice way to help those other decks in the mirrors. I think it's a good deck. I definitely think that non-Killmonger death Thanos decks are the way to go, however. And I always have felt that. For tournaments though, because there's quite a lot of Thanos decks doing the rounds, it has proven that the Wave death decks are maybe slightly better for the tournaments because of how common the mirrors are. We've also got this list by Lamy Series, guy I know actually, and he told me about this deck that he played. He won a tournament with it the other day. It's got a Wasp in there with the Lockjaw and the Thanos, and a Death and a Thor and a Jane Foster. Really spicy list. I think he's got a few different versions of this, but the Wasp just is a very good card in Thanos still. It's 0 cost. You obviously don't have those 0 cost cards off Quinjet anymore, and just being able to play stuff into your Lockjaw for free makes a big difference sometimes. Okay, moving on, we have another deck with Doom and Wave. Again, I've been experimenting with a lot of these, and I can't really settle on a list that I like. I definitely think that there's a few things this particular list could change. I think it wants to play Goose, but my list's very similar. I wasn't playing White Queen or Shang-Chi. But yeah, it looks like a nice version of the deck. The idea is that you just get some early game presence with cards like Iceman, Lizard. This deck definitely wants Goose. That is the one thing I can highly recommend. The reason Goose is so good here is because you play Wave on 5. That sets the cost of everything in everyone's hand to 4, except your She-Hulk, which is 2. So you can play your She-Hulk into your Goose lane. They can't play anything unless they have a Goose or a Death or a She-Hulk themselves, or some kind of cost reduction like a Sarah. So yeah, definitely would recommend Goose, but apart from that, it looks like a nice list. I think the White Queen could possibly go for Goose, or maybe the Scorpion. All right, we've got some other decks here. Still like a good Darkhawk deck. This is like a Darkhawk deck without Dino. Same concept. I think this is the exact list we saw above, in fact. Electro ramp makes it into tier 2, which I agree with. This definitely has a very high play rate, and I really honestly hate this deck. I've queued into it a couple times at tournaments, and it kind of makes the meta in tournaments feel quite rock, paper, scissors like. If you just have a deck which is maybe trying to beat Shuri, and then you go into Sandman, you might be screwed and you just get knocked out. It feels kind of bad when you're playing best of ones. Sandman obviously got buffed a few months ago to 5/5. It was a 4/1 before. I think they should revert it personally. I don't think this is a very healthy deck for the game. Let me know in the comments if you agree. I just think it's a little bit too on the nose binary, like you just play a card, play a card, play a card. It's very easy to play, and I think this deck is too strong for what it really should be doing. I think it's fine to have as a deck in the game if it's not meta, but this being meta, like Sandman being meta. Ugh. And I used to be the biggest Sandman fan when he was 4 energy, but that's because I was a hipster. Now that it's just like everywhere, it's a big no from me. But it's a great deck, no doubt about it, and the list looks very solid as well. Okay. Bounce up next. Bounce, again, kind of struggling a little bit due to the popularity of Leech, due to the popularity of Ramp with Sandman as well. But it's a great deck, no doubt about it. This one has Iron Man instead of Chavez. Looks like a solid take on the deck. I would personally be playing Chavez, though, over this Iron Man, I do believe. just because you want your Bast early, you want all your cards early and be bouncing them back, and often you can have a full hand on turn number 5, which means there's no point of not playing Shavas sometimes. Okay, moving on to tier 3 of Galactus. I still think Galactus gets criminally underrated in these tier lists. It's definitely a tier 2 deck in my opinion. I think the stats on Galactus, the data that a lot of these websites have access to because of their deck trackers, are somewhat misleading because lots of people play suboptimal Galactus decks. I think it's just a solid deck. Again, I don't own the card myself, so I can't comment on the list too much, but it has a lot of the cards that I would like to see in there. The Yondu, the Electro, I think Spider-Man is great here as well. It looks like a solid build. Maybe Psylocke is the one card standing out as a miss, because the only way you can ramp into Galactus is with Electro or Wave. And Wave, kind of problematic at times, because you might give your opponent that chance to play Aero or something like that. Of course, Aero not too popular. I feel like Galactus has got to be tier 2 though. It's a pretty unhealthy deck for the game still, in my opinion. We've got Sarah Surf up next in tier 3. I would put this at like lower tier 2. Again, I wouldn't play Sarah in this one either. If you guys haven't seen the list I got to Infinite with, it's quite similar. I don't play Nova. I have no Scorpion. I play Cloak and Lizard. Most of the 3-drops are similar, but I also play Kingpin. And I don't have Mr. Fantastic or Polaris. I'm playing like Rogue. Don't play Sarah. Don't believe in it. Instead of playing Sarah on 5, just play Goose and a 3-cost card. It is much better. Goose on 5, so good. But yeah, I think this is a tier 2 deck. Definitely. I think it's really solid. Just has quite a lot of bad matchups into Leech and into Sandman as well, but it's very good into Shuri. Dracula discard up next. I probably agree with this being tier 3. They've put the Lockjaw in now, which is cool. This is pretty much bang on my deck with a 1 card I don't play is Wolverine, because Wolverine off like into Lockjaw sounds really bad. Also, it's kind of cock blocking your Swarm Colleen combo. I just play. Honestly, I haven't been able to decide on this like last card. I've been experimenting with a bunch like Blade. I've tried Vision. That's just like a Lockjaw target. That was okay. I've tried the Gambit as well as Moon Knight. I don't really have a preferred card, but it certainly wouldn't be Wolverine. I've tried Nightcrawler. I think like Vision, or probably just, to be honest, the Gambit or Moon Knight is the way to go. But yeah, I agree with tier 3. Deathwave, I agree with being tier 3 as well. Not a very good deck. This looks fine. And then they also had some like not underperforming, but like under the radar decks worth mentioning as well. So let's take a quick look at those silent performers of the week. Cerebro 2, Thanos Control, and Kazoo with Dracula as well. Overall, I think this is the best tier list they've done in a little while. Also worth mentioning, they did have quite a few of these as high on tier 2 and low on tier 2. So the ones that were lower were Thanos, Death Lockjaw, good cards Doomwave, Electro Ramp, and Bounce. I would maybe put Bounce a bit higher, but yeah. I think this is a pretty good tier list. I think Shuri needs to be on top. It's pretty hard to tell though with the meta. I do think the meta's quite balanced at the moment. I think with Shuri getting nerfed in the next patch, I think we're closer to getting into a good place. I do think at the moment my main issue is a lot of these decks near the top of the meta are quite toxic to play against. Or maybe not even at the top of the meta, but decks with high play rate. For example, Shuri being an obvious one. Thanos decks playing Leech with Lockjaw. Wave on 5 I think is quite a toxic idea. I also think Galactus is quite a toxic idea, and just binary playstyle, and of course Sandman. So I would definitely like to see a few of these decks which are quite unpleasant to play against get some nerfs in the coming weeks. We have heard that we're going to be getting balance changes every week, but I think that the meta's kind of slowly but surely getting into a better spot than it has been in the recent months. But I'm going to be glad to see the back of Shuri and hopefully Thanos with Leech as well. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think about their tier list. Is there anything you think I got wrong? Do you agree that Sarah Control isn't the best deck in the game? I don't see it. As much as I think it's great, it's just too weak against too many things right now. Thanks so much for watching. See you on the next video, and looking forward to sharing my own meta report of my own deck lists in the next couple of days. See you.